Western democracy, traces its roots to ancient Greece, a land of small, often quarreling city-states, scattered across rocky hills and coastal plains, each proud of its own traditions, each guarding its independence fiercely, yet occasionally coming together against a common threat. The story begins in 499 BC, when several Greek cities in Asia Minor, territories that had been conquered by Persia, rose up in rebellion, their people long resentful of the Persian-appointed tyrants who ruled over them. In an act of defiance and solidarity, Athens and the small city of Eretria sent troops to help their fellow Greeks. At first there were victories, but strategic missteps and the sheer weight of Persian resources eventually crushed the revolt. With the rebellion put down, the Persian king, Darius I, was furious. He saw Athens and Eretria not just as meddling outsiders, but as dangerous examples to other subject peoples. If these free Greek cities could challenge Persian authority, perhaps others might dare to follow. Darius vowed to punish them and to bring the rest of Greece under his rule. In 492 BC, he launched his first invasion of mainland Greece, marching through Thrace and Macedon and sending heralds to the remaining Greek city-states, demanding submission. Many, fearful of Persian power, agreed, offering the symbolic gift of earth and water, which represented surrender. But two cities refused outright: Athens and Sparta. The first Persian invasion ended in disaster for Darius. At the now famous Battle of Marathon in 490 BC, here, an Athenian force of just 10 men, facing a Persian army over twice their size, won a stunning victory, forcing the Persians back to their ships and sending them home humiliated. Darius's plans for a second invasion were delayed by unrest elsewhere in his empire. And by the time he was ready to march again, he died of old age, leaving the task to his son, Xerxes. Xerxes was determined to succeed where his father had failed, and to crush the Greek resistance once and for all. He took his time, amassing what ancient sources like Herodotus claim was an army of more than 2 million men, though modern historians believe the real number was closer to 200,000 to 250,000. Still, an overwhelming force for the ancient world. His plan was simple but formidable: march his army overland into Greece from the north, while his massive navy sailed down the coast, ready to land troops behind any defenders who tried to block his path. In the face of this immense threat, many Greek cities remembered the fate of Eretria in the first invasion, how it had been burned to the ground, and its people sold into slavery. Some chose to submit without a fight, but Athens and Sparta, joined by a handful of allies, refused. The Spartans, under their king Leonidas, assembled a small force to meet the Persians. Leonidas chose just 300 of his personal bodyguards, the best warriors in Sparta, each with a son to carry on his name. Alongside them came several thousand troops from other Greek cities, bringing the total force to around 70 men. This number, tiny compared to Xerxes' army, may seem almost suicidal, but Leonidas had a plan. Rather than meet the Persians in open battle, he would fight them at Thermopylae, a narrow coastal pass, hemmed in by steep cliffs on one side, and the sea on the other. Here, the Persian numbers would count for far less. The width of the pass at the time was only about 15 meters, barely enough for a few dozen men to fight side by side. At sea, Athens took the lead, sending 271 triremes sleek, 3-banked warships, fast and deadly in skilled hands, to meet a Persian fleet of over 1,000 ships. The Athenians understood that if the Persian navy outflanked the Greek army, all would be lost, but they also knew they could not win at sea by sheer numbers. Instead, they would rely on speed, discipline, and the advantage of fighting in narrow waters. The Persian army was diverse, drawn from across their vast empire. Their infantry often wore leather or quilted cloth armor, carrying wicker shields, short spears, bows, and curved swords. Their most famous unit was the 10 Immortals, elite soldiers who were always kept at full strength, replacing any man who fell, so their number seemed unchanging. At sea, the Persians also used triremes, but many of their ships were supply and transport vessels, not dedicated warships, and in the days before the battle, storms destroyed nearly a third of their fleet. The Greek hoplites, by contrast, were heavily armed and armored. Each carried a large, round, bronze-faced shield called a hoplon, a long spear tipped with a leaf-shaped blade, and a short sword for close combat. They wore bronze helmets, breastplates, and greaves, forming the famous Phalanx formation, a wall of shields and spear points that could smash through lighter troops. This training, discipline, and equipment would prove crucial in the days to come. When the Persians reached Thermopylae in 480 BC, Xerxes sent a scout to observe the Greek defenders. The spy returned with a strange report the Spartans were calmly exercising and combing their hair, as if preparing for a festival. Rather than the fight of their lives, Xerxes sent a messenger offering the Greeks a chance to surrender, promising them lands and freedom if they became his allies. Many in the Greek camp considered it, but Leonidas stood firm, and his resolve convinced the others to stay. On the first day of battle, Xerxes sent waves of troops into the narrow pass. The Greeks stood firm, their shields locked, their spears thrusting in unison. The Persians could not break through, and the confined space made their numbers useless. Thousands of Persians fell, while the Greek losses were light. Enraged, Xerxes sent in his Immortals, confident they would succeed where others had failed. But even they were beaten back, unable to penetrate the Phalanx. At sea, the Greek fleet fought the Persians at Artemisium, using the narrow waters to neutralize the enemy's numbers. Storms and skillful maneuvering gave the Greeks the upper hand, sinking or capturing dozens of Persian ships. Morale soared. It seemed that perhaps, against all odds, victory was possible. On the second day, the fighting on land and sea continued much the same, the Persians taking heavy losses, the Greeks holding strong. But on the night of the second day, disaster struck. A Greek named Ephialtes betrayed his countrymen, revealing to Xerxes a hidden mountain path that would allow the Persians to outflank the defenders. Xerxes sent troops along the path, brushing aside the small Greek force guarding it. At dawn, Leonidas learned the truth: they were about to be surrounded. He dismissed most of the army, ordering them to retreat, but chose to remain with his 300 Spartans, 700 Thespians who refused to leave, and a few hundred Thebans whose loyalty was uncertain. Why Leonidas stayed has been debated for centuries. Some say it was prophecy, others that it was pure strategy, buying time for the retreat and inspiring all of Greece with his sacrifice. The final stand was brutal. The Greeks fought with ferocity, cutting down wave after wave of Persians. Even after Leonidas fell, his men fought to recover his body, killing scores in the process. Eventually, overwhelmed and exhausted, they were all slain. The Thebans surrendered. Xerxes ordered Leonidas's head displayed on a stake as a warning. At sea, on the third day, the Persian navy finally managed to push the Greeks back, forcing their withdrawal. With Thermopylae lost, the road to Athens lay open. The Athenians had already evacuated the city, leaving only a few behind. Xerxes burned Athens to the ground, but he had not destroyed its people or its spirit. The stand at Thermopylae had not stopped the Persians, but it had bought time. Time for the Greeks to regroup and to plan their next move. Themistocles, the Athenian naval commander, lured the Persian fleet into the narrow straits of Salamis, where their numbers worked against them. The Greeks won a decisive victory, cutting off the Persian army from its supplies. Xerxes returned to Asia, leaving part of his force behind. The following year, the Greeks defeated them at Plataea, ending the Persian threat to the mainland. The sacrifice at Thermopylae became legend, a symbol of courage and unity, of standing against impossible odds. It preserved Athens, and with it, the fragile beginnings of democracy. Without that stand, the course of Western history might have been very different. Yet history is never simple. The Persians were not the villains of myth. They too had advanced ideas, and their empire contributed to the development of civilization. But at Thermopylae, it was the Greeks who stood and fell, and in falling, inspired generations to come.